In this video, we are going to be talking about the difference in the desire for empathy from other people in society between people with an illness on one side and people with a disability on the other side. We will particularly look at Javi Carell when addressing the perspective of people with an illness, and we will look at Stella Young and Harriet McBride Johnson concerning the view of people with a disability. We are going to somewhat generalize their views and project them onto people with an illness and people with a disability respectively. Based on the point of view of Javi Carell, we will be talking more about her later on, we can say that people with an illness, often a terminal one, want more empathy from the people around them. According to Stella and Harriet, we will be talking more about them later on as well, people with a disability want less empathy from society. We are first going to link all of this to diversity. Then we are going to talk a little bit more about each of the speakers or writers that we mentioned. After that, we will look at conflicting and corresponding statements of both sides and dissect both views on empathy. We are going to conclude all this by declaring which points of view we find more convincing and why. We believe that our central idea is linked to diversity because it shows how diverse the views of different people in somewhat similar situations can be. All three speakers or writers that we address are dealing with a life-changing disease, but they all have different ideas about how other people and society should perceive and deal with their disease, about whether these people should express any empathy. This reveals the diversity in perspectives that exists in our society. The people that we talk about, particularly Harriet and Stella, also show how diverse disabilities can be and how differently they can impact someone's life. Javi Carell is a professor of philosophy. She has lymphangioliomyomatosis, also known as LAM. LAM is a rare fatal lung disease that is only diagnosed in women from all different races. There is no cure found for the disease yet. Only a lung transplant could cure a woman with LAM, which comes with a lot of risks. LAM has influenced her life in many different ways. She now often wears an oxygen cannula to help her breathe, and she has lost many friendships and social contacts due to her disease. She experiences her disease as a huge impact on her life. For example, she writes about how it prevented her from having children, which for her means that there's a whole other kind of life completely devoted to children that she could have been living but isn't because of her disease. Stella Young was an Australian comedian, journalist, and disability rights activist. She was born with osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a group of genetic disorders that mainly affects the bones. Symptoms include a blue coloration to the whites of the eye, short height, loose joints, hearing loss, breathing problems, and problems with the teeth. There is no cure for the disorder, and potential treatment could be care of broken bones, pain medication, physical therapy, or surgery that puts metal rods through bones to strengthen them. Young was in a motorized wheelchair, and her disease did not affect her mental capabilities. She talked about how she was living a very ordinary, unexceptional life when she was a teenager, that she was just like every other teenage girl. From this we can conclude that she did not experience her disability as something as life-changing as Javi Carell experienced her illness. This shows the diversity between people. She passed away in December 2014 at the age of 32. Harriet McBride Johnson was an attorney and a disability rights activist. She had a congenital neuromuscular wasting disease, which resulted in her being in a motorized wheelchair, and she had a weak immune system. She had an assistant that helped her with fulfilling some basic needs, like going to the bathroom. She passed away in June 2008 at the age of 51. The main contrast between the two views is that Javi Carell wants more empathy from people and society, while Stella Young and Harriet McBride Johnson don't want people's pity and empathy. Javi Carell wrote, "I often wondered why it is that not a single medical practitioner has ever said they are sorry to hear I am ill." Stella Young said the following, "I am not here to inspire you. I am here to tell you that we have been lied to about disability. Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing. Capital B, capital T. It's a bad thing, and to live with a disability makes you exceptional. Well, it's not a bad thing, and it doesn't make you exceptional. One thing that the two views have in common is that they both say that they are often objectified. People only see the illness or disability, and not the person. Harvey Carell writes, "Disability curtails our ability to control what others think about us, and it places the interaction, at least initially, in the shadow of the illness." Harriet McBride Johnson wrote, "But they don't want to know. They think they know everything there is to know, just by looking at me. That's how stereotypes work. They don't know that they're confused, that they're really expressing the discombobulation that comes in my wake." Another thing that the views have in common is the idea that strangers are often prejudiced. They don't mince their words and say certain things without much knowledge about the topic. For example, Harriet McBride Johnson wrote, "Strangers on the street are moved to comment, 'If I had to live like you, I think I'd kill myself.'" And Harvey Carell wrote about an incident that occurred after she had put on her oxygen cannula. She said, "The man turned to me, standing perhaps 10 feet away, lifted an accusing finger to my face and said, 'Ugh, look, she's wearing nasal specs.' His wife turned to him sharply, and I could hear her whispering. The word cancer was the only one I could make out." We will now compare the two views on empathy. Harvey Carell, representing people with an illness, feels that a lack of empathy dehumanizes her, especially when this lack of empathy comes from medical professionals. She feels that the lack of empathy makes it so that she is treated as an object instead of as a person. In her experience, this makes her encounters with her doctors and other medical professionals very unpleasant. Again, she wrote, "I often wondered why it is that not a single medical practitioner has ever said they are sorry to hear I am ill." Stella Young and Harriet McBride Johnson, representing the perspective of people with a disability, feel that the empathy they get only works to their disadvantage. The empathy is based on the idea that people have of people with disabilities. People have the idea that people with disabilities are suffering and that they are worse off physically and mentally, that the lives of people with disabilities are less worth living. Stella and Harriet do not want people's empathy. They just want people to educate themselves so that they will see that there is no reason to pity them. Harriet said, "We need to confront the life-killing stereotype that says we're all about suffering. We need to bear witness to our pleasures." And Stella said, "We are a society that treats people with disabilities with condescension and pity, not dignity and respect." We believe that the arguments presented by Harriet and Stella against empathy are stronger than those of Harvey Carell in favor of empathy. The rejection of empathy by Harriet and Stella is rooted in what that empathy stands for: pity and condescension, based on the idea that the lives of people with disabilities are inferior and less worthwhile. People pity them because they believe their lives are filled with struggle and pain. This makes them believe that when people with disabilities do ordinary things, it is admirable, when all it really is people living their lives just like everyone else. Carell wants empathy to have a nicer experience with her doctors and friends. She simply wants to feel supported. This is of course a very legitimate reason to want empathy, but it doesn't link to a problem that runs as deep as the one with disability. It is also something she can more easily fix on a personal level, by discussing it with her doctors and friends. Moreover, it is something that she has to live with for a shorter amount of time than Harriet and Stella have to live with their disabilities. Carell got her illness later in life. She wasn't born with it like Harriet and Stella were. This convinces us of the fact that there should be less empathy for people with an illness or disability, and instead there should be more education and understanding.